Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So, tell us a little bit. You said you had that gig coming up, and you got some other gigs coming up as well. Oh, you did mention that you were part
of a band. Tell us about that band experience as well, because sometimes folks like preferring being on the solo side, which is kind of what you're doing now. But then you were part of a funk band. So where was that funk band at, and how did y'all come about, and what led to that band not performing, or do you still perform with any groups?
Yeah. So let me actually fast forward, because that was in school. There was another funk band I had when I was living in Houston called the Gentlemen of Pork Pie, and I don't really know how we came up with that name. I don't actually eat pork, but anyway, that was the name of the band. And and it was a 3-piece band. There was a drummer, a bass player, and myself. I was playing keys, singing, and played a little bit of saxophone. Having a band, it's all dependent on getting along with people enough to make good music. That enough part is the tricky part, right? That group was great. We got along really well. It was small enough that we were always at rehearsal. And really, I was the reason why we broke apart, because I had to leave Houston. And so it was kind of one of those points where you're starting to actually get some good recognition in the area. So in Houston, we had a kind of a crew that would come out to our shows. And so it was a little bit heartbreaking in that sense. But I still keep in touch with those guys, and it's a wonderful experience. Also, when I was in Houston, there's another band I was in, which was kind of the opposite. It was a neo-soul band. It started out being quite large. I was just playing saxophone in there. But there was a horn section, there was a trombone player, trumpet player, backup singers, lead female vocalist, drummer, percussionist, a couple guitars, etc. And after the first rehearsal, there was just no leadership in the band. And so the second rehearsal, there was 8 people instead of 10. Then after that, there was 6, and it just kind of dwindled and dwindled. And everybody was talented musicians, and so it was sad to see something kind of dissolve away because of lack of leadership. But like I said, on the other hand, I was in this other smaller group that was great.
It's interesting you bring up leadership, because that's part of what Jessica was talking about. Now, as a musician, what do you think is being good qualities of leadership that you need to see, either with you being the leader or with somebody else being a leader? What are some of the leadership qualities that you look for, either expounding or that you look for other people have in the confines or in the context of a musical group?
Yeah. So you got to seriously check the ego. You either got to not have a big ego or just check it and just really try to be a selfless human being and hear other people in a very literal sense, with the music. But also, with the band particularly, there's also just some nitty-gritty, you have to be on top of things. You have to be willing to do non-music related stuff, scheduling and booking shows, or figuring out who's going to book the shows, and just really kind of take control, because, if you got a group of musicians, you might have 1 or 2 that kind of have their act together, but in general, we're not going to have our act together. So we're there because we can play a particular instrument, we can sing, we can write music. We're not there for anything else. So you got to have someone who can take that component and just really wrangle everything else. If somebody has transportation issues or tardiness, just all these other things that just come up, you got to have a leader who can really understand those things and really, wrangle everybody and make sure they come out when they need to come out.
Yeah, that wrangling aspect is definitely an important part of leadership, no matter what kind of leaders you were talking about, whether it's governmental leaders or political leaders or even musicians or even leaders in the acting field. You definitely got to have that ability to wrangle schedules and just wrangle egos, as you just said earlier, because that definitely becomes a vital issue. Now, I was just wondering, you first went to musical school, and what year did you first develop your musical skills? Was it in high school or was it in college that you first developed them?
I guess, high school, and then it got gained after that. So, as I mentioned, I, started playing jazz in particular in high school with some folks over from Central. But then after high school, that was the the end of formal training. So then after that point, it was being in various music groups in college, and then after college, I moved to New York, and just connecting with people there, learning some music programs, bringing it back to the tech piece, learning some software and how to program, learning how sound equipment works, that kind of thing. So just kind of a building, have good relationships with people who have taught me. So people who might be better at, I'm no kind of real pianist, but people who are much better at piano who could tell me how to make things sound different. People who are really good at creating sounds with digital and analog synthesizers, and just kind of learning by playing with others and learning from others.
So what are some of the programs that you recommend that other people use if they are going into music like you are? Like, what are some of the programs that if you were talking to a young person, you would say this is something that you absolutely must use?
Yeah, so there's tons of stuff out there, and people have all different sorts of opinions. The two that I would recommend, if you are using the program live, like you're actually using a computer live, I would recommend something called Ableton Live. It's just designed that way to be able to use live. So a lot of times if you'll see kind of DJs that are really manipulating the sound and creating new sounds on the fly, they're oftentimes using Ableton Live. If you're a producer and you're really just creating tracks for people, or you're a composer and you're creating music, and you're not performing with the software, I would recommend Logic, which is very powerful. It's a little complicated, but if you're producing music, you need all the bells and whistles you can get.
Cool. Definitely appreciate that. And just along the lines of that same kind of question, but differently with the live people, who are some of the people that influence you in your own musical development? Is there like certain musicians in any genre, be it jazz, be it R&B, whatever the genres are that you feel influenced by, that are the ones that inspire you on a regular basis?
Yeah. Well, the first on the list is Prince. It's probably true of a lot of people, but I just like I said, first and foremost would be Prince in many ways. Everything from how to make particular sounds to a willingness to speak directly about things but still be poetic. Anyway, going on about Prince. But anyway, so Prince would be the top of the list. Nina Simone, David Bowie, Sade would kind of fill out a lot of that. Recently, though, I've been discovering people that I think have influenced me that I wasn't aware of. So I mentioned earlier on the call that I was putting one of my kids to sleep. And so I have two young kids. Since I've had them, I've been trying to find music in my collection that I want them to start listening to. And I recently pulled out a Lady Smith Black Mambazo album. So as y'all probably know, it's a cappella South African singers in Zulu and other languages from South Africa. And a lot of the non-language vocalizations in the song, so like, they'll be singing the song, and, there'll be just a guy who will kind of make a little sound. It's like, something like that. And I do a lot of that in my songs, and I was like listening, and it's like, oh, I guess that's where I picked this up from. So it's been nice to kind of go back through music and hear elements of what I'm doing and things I listened to a while ago but I haven't listened to recently.
So as you're developing a soundtrack for your children, how old are your children again?
2.5 and 8 months.
So you develop a soundtrack for these young children, because they're young children. You're actually finding that there's some music that you have found that influenced you, but you didn't realize it was influencing you until you were listening to the music that you were providing to them. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's music I hadn't listened to in a while, and I listen to it now, and I hear things in it that I know are in my music. And I was like, well, this album came first because it's like an old album, so it must have influenced me and just stuck somewhere in the back of my mind and has come out more recently in music I've written.
Definitely could hear that influence in your music, because I can hear, even when I was hearing you at the Carrick, the different kinds of influences. Like I said, I definitely heard the jazz influence. I think I heard a little bit of the R&B influences, and I would even argue that there might have been, and of course it's my own personal bias, that there might have even been a couple of blues influences in some of your songs as well. And then you just mentioned that one of your influences is Nina Simone, so definitely I can see where that might be some of that blues influence as well.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your own music, are there any other, I know you got the concert dates, but are there any new releases that you're planning to put out anytime soon? And also, if you could tell our listeners the names of the ones that you have that exist already, because I know that you've got, I believe it was either 2 or 3 that you were providing folks at the Carrick show, but if you could give folks the title of those in case they want to look them up on either whatever mediums that you have that are available, be that Bandcamp, be that whatever else. And also, if you have any upcoming things that you're working on, if you'll let folks know about that as well.
Yeah. So, in terms of new stuff, what I'm doing right now is I'm focusing on. I have enough for an album right now, a new album right now. But the way I write songs, I write them and then they kind of evolve as I'm performing them. So basically, over the next maybe 6 months or so, I'm really pushing the songs I've written in the past year to a point where I'm really comfortable with recording them. In parallel, I also have basically an album's worth of acapella stuff, or not acapella, but acoustic, so just piano and voice. And I've been sitting on that for a while, and I just haven't had the time to just really do it. So one of those two, I think within the next, definitely within the next year, will be available. But I'm sure that the majority of your listeners probably don't know me and probably haven't heard my music. So hopefully for them, the album that I came out with last year will be just as entertaining. So albums, there's the 3 albums that you can purchase from me at performances. The latest one is called MGL, featuring the Reverend Brian Wingo King. So my name is Mark Little, but when I perform, I also go as MGL, just my initials. And the synthesizers and sequencers and all the gadgets and electronics that I perform with, collectively, I call them. They have a name. The Reverend Brian Wingo King is what I call all my equipment. So the last album is called MGL, featuring the Reverend Brian Wingo King. You can get that on Bandcamp. Second album that I have in hard copy as well is called Days in Spring. And this is an album from a few years ago, but has some great songs on it. And so that's another one that I would encourage folks to check out on Bandcamp. The third album is one that has songs that I wrote for my sister, as I mentioned, who's a choreographer. Her name is Maura Garcia. You can check out her at mauragarciadance.com. But that album is called Look Before You Leap. And it's a live album from a performance that we did together at the Ackland Art Museum, where I provided the music. Some was sequenced, but some was sung live and performed live, and she had her choreography and dance that she did at the same time as well. And if you go to Bandcamp, there's other albums up there as well that you can check out. But those are the 3 that I kind of been pushing recently.
And like I said, I've definitely picked up one of those and have enjoyed the sounds that I've heard with it, and I definitely will be sharing it with Dean, and hopefully we'll get some of those sounds on an upcoming edition of the show as well. Because we definitely try to incorporate music into the show in addition to our conversations and things of that nature. Speaking of which, Dean. Dean's still with me. Dean has gone off somewhere. Don't know where Dean went off to, but definitely.
No, I'm right here, bro.
All right, drop that number. Drop that number one more time for him. The number for us, and also, did you get that email from me that featured our guest from last week? Because I sent it to you, but I don't know if you got it yet or not.
I got it, but I need the attachment. It was just the text itself.